Twyla Tharp, it is such a pleasure to have you here with us today and speak with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
One of the main purposes of this interview marathon is to explore how national and international artists like yourself connect to the Chicago dance scene. So today I wanted to talk about the Tharp Project as it's known in the Hubbard Street Rep. What is it and how did it come about?
Well, I'm sure you have more details than I about this. It began with Lou Conti and my extreme regard for Lou, both as an individual but as a company director and the original group that he had developed. The Cooksey and the Ron and the Gomez and the Claire, and they were all fantastic and very like my company, individuals, but they worked brilliantly together. Huge amounts of touring, great kind of philanthropic civic activities. And Lou did it for the right reason, which was to touch people and to bring them excellence. So I responded to that component. He had that part of his mandate to bring the best that he could accomplish was clear. And I think that his audiences felt that. So it made it a privilege to work with him. We did some of the older repertoire there, Sue's Leg, the Fugue. They probably did a Baker's Dozen. They did a Fait Accompli, which is like a killer piece, but they took it on. And then I did a commission for them to, I remember Clifford, for that group, more or less before Lou kind of retired.
And what you chronicled these pieces so well already. What was the strategy behind the order in which they were learned or premiered?
You'll perhaps have to help me out here. I'm sure he started with the basics, which is the fugue, and I know they had a very good fugue. They had both a strong women's fugue and a strong men's fugue, which is very unusual. But the fugue is an extremely technically demanding piece, and one's very exposed. There is no music, and you clearly see the dancer's craft. You see the ways in which they are unified as a team. That company was capable of pulling together very tight. They knew one another a lot. They toured a lot. And they were interchangeable parts. You saw that in the fugue. Sue's Leg had more character to it. Baker's Dozen is obviously a larger piece and involved a greater number of dancers, but all the dancers in his company had an individuality. Some of them had a kind of strength, Cooksey in particular. No, that's not fair to say. I mean, all the women had singular capacities, but I like strong women. Cooksey was a strong woman. We like that.
And so, what had you learned about Hubbard Street, the company, and also its audience that informed your creation of I Remember Clifford for them?
Well, one learns the individual performers. When a dancer is cast in roles that have been done by others, you can bring to play the components that were in the original and see how a next generation approaches the same basic material, but more or less leapfrogging and interpretation, which is very valuable. Then you see who that person is as opposed to that person trying to be someone else. For example, Ron DeGesus. Ron became a big player in Clifford, but he was perhaps, he was also, as I recall, he was in Sue's Leg. I think he did I don't remember which, if he did the tap roll or if he did the other part, but he would have been extremely different. But I would have seen, oh, this guy's something we didn't have. Maybe in this new piece we can get some of that out. So being able to broach the individual through repertory is a good way of coming to know a dancer.
And just the musicality of that group really strikes me. Well, especially in I Remember Clifford, all of those jazz classics. The clip that I've seen is Ron DeJesus, I think maybe in Sidewinder.
Uh,
Um, And just to me, and knowing what I know about Hubbard Street under Lou's direction, musicality played a huge role in
Right,
their work, which it seems translated really well to your choreography.
right. Lou was I love him to death. He was a hooker. His group began as a tap group, I think. So it was based in rhythm and was based in rhythmic accuracy, which is extremely important when you're working with something that can be as arrhythmic as some modern dance.
I imagine that definitely helped them too in approaching the fugue as the first
Oh,
piece that they learned from your rep. Yeah.
totally, totally.
You've worked with so many companies throughout your career. What would you say were the distinguishing features of Hubbard Street as the company existed then?
Well, I think that the things that I mentioned, that Lou's trademark in precision and rigor and the individuality of the dancer welded into a single unit. These are the ideal components of a great company director. End of story. Good luck.
And this collaboration, the Tharp project, doesn't exist in a vacuum either. I'm wondering, why was it the right project for you at that time in your career, and what about that experience did you potentially take with you on your next endeavor?
Well, when you commission a piece, you have a new piece that comes. It's like a child that's going to grow up. So I think that the commission, which the whole project materialized in that commission, becomes an entity that is that company because that company built it. I think that's probably the short answer to your question.
And what about for your own work and your career trajectory? What did you get out of this collaboration over the course of what, 5 or 6 years?
I got some dancers out of that collaboration. I got some dancers for moving out of that collaboration. I'm always grateful to have wonderful performers who want to come work in another vein, and both Gomez and Ron were very important in the original Moving Out, which was an incredibly strong unit, and they contributed to that big time.
Yeah, it's great to see how connections that started into Chicago, not just you, but with Ron and Gomez, definitely, branched out. We're going to be including Ron DeJesus in this event too. So I'm really glad that we can start connecting those dots even in one event. Um, it's a real honor to include you in this marathon event and add this interview to the Chicago Dance History Archives. Is there anything that we haven't covered about your work in the 90s with Hubbard Street that you'd like to make sure we know?
I wouldn't know where to begin. I'm happy to try to address any questions that you might have. Other than I think it's important to remember when they were the original Hubbard Street and where they were in the original space when there was a train going by about 8 feet away from one end of your studio about every 12 seconds, and about the kind of concentration, about really the kind of dedication that the first generation of people who go through. I mean, it's quaint. You can look back at it and say that first space it had a kind of charm. It was also extraordinarily uncomfortable. It was not air conditioned. It required a true commitment of heart to work there, and you were glad to do it. And no one, I mean, did you want better circumstances? Sure, you always do. But for the original groups that formulate these companies and come out of nowhere, like Lou's original dancers doing tap shows in hospitals and taking that spirit in and building on it. And not trying to jettison it, but retaining it and encouraging that kind of heart. It wasn't about grant applications. It was about dancing for the people.
Wow, that's put really well, and it just explains so much about it was such a foundation of the company. And
Right.
yeah, yeah. Um, Thank you for that, for sure. And thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real honor. Congratulations on your new book, by the way. Actually, I have my copy right here. I can, yeah. I should have prepared a little bit more. Here we go, right here.
Thank you. Easter is coming, and then there will be Christmas next year, right?
We'll be sure to drop information in the chat on how to get it.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you so much.